These were the final moments of the first season of House of the Dragon, which aired 3 years after the most disastrous television finale in history. Set nearly 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon was the exploration of the Dance of Dragons, an event that's mentioned many times during the events of Game of Thrones.
What are you reading?
The Dance of Dragons.
What's it about?
It's the story of the fight between Rhaenyra Targaryen and her half-brother Aegon for control of the Seven Kingdoms.
It was the bloodiest, most brutal civil war in Westerosi history. It was a war raged between siblings, with Rhaenyra Targaryen fighting her half-brother Aegon Targaryen over who was their father Viserys Targaryen's rightful heir. And the fighting that followed eventually led to the extinction of dragons and the fall of the Targaryen dynasty. Throughout Season 1 of House of the Dragon, or Hot D, which I'll abbreviate it to, we followed these characters Rhaenyra, Viserys, Aegon's mother, Alicent, and Daemon, people we've only heard about in Westerosi legend through years of their lives, from childhood to adulthood, and we saw every event in these characters' lives, every step along the way that led them from going from friends and family to sworn enemies bent on killing each other. All the greed and manipulation and scheming, Alicent's family versus Rhaenyra's family, these tensions reaching such a massive boiling point until this happens. Rhaenyra's second-born son, Luke, is killed by Alicent's second-born son, Aemond, and moments after we're hit with this evil, angry scowl. This is the final image we're left with for 2 years. This look is all we need. This look is the promise of things to come. That next season, in 2 years, we'll finally see the Targaryens earn their reputation. Why 200 years later, everyone is terrified of these vicious, violent, mad conquerors. Soon, we will understand why the words of House Targaryen are fire and blood. The Dance of Dragons has begun, and 2 years later, Season 2 has finally arrived.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. You get your goddamn ugly ass.
Oh no. Oh no. What the fuck happened? Sure, some of the writing in Season 1 was inconsistent, and it occasionally took the Season 6 of Game of Thrones approach and traded some logic for spectacle. But as a whole, House of the Dragon was the brilliant, exciting, riveting revival that Game of Thrones desperately needed. It was bold and confident in what it was. It was something familiar but so fresh and different from what we've seen in Thrones so far. And the hype for Season 2 was immense. As shown by the Season 1 finale, we were finally going to get war. We were going to get action. Every single fucking piece of marketing was about picking sides for the wars to come. Are you with the Greens or with the Blacks? Which I always think is funny to say out loud. Team Rhaenyra or Team Alicent? They had banners all around New York City. They dangled a life-sized Vagar off the top of the Empire State Building. I mean, sure, the lead showrunner of Season 1 left, and sure, they were doing a shortened season, which historically has never ended well for Thrones. And sure, the writer strikes happened, and Matt Smith on like 3 different occasions complained about how poorly it was going behind the scenes. And there were a lot of early warning signs that things might not be going all right in Westeros. But the hype was still there. It was fucking exciting. Game of Thrones was back, baby. But by the end of this season, I don't think people are as excited to see what happens next as they were at the end of Season 1.
Every single episode of House of the Dragon has been an absolute banger. I think it's safe to say House of the Dragon Season 2 had the worst finale in TV history.
So much of Hot D Season 2 does not work. It's messy, sloppily plotted, anticlimactic, and poorly paced. And while it's not quite as bad as some of the weaker parts of the later seasons of Thrones yet, there has yet to be an episode as bad as Beyond the Wall. The level of writing here is absolutely not at the standard we've come to expect from the series following Season 1, and certainly not at the level of Thrones' golden age. I don't think I need to go into much detail about why Game of Thrones is or was the best show ever, at least for the first 4 seasons, but you know, there's a lot in seasons 5 and 6 that's also very good. And fuck, even seasons 7 and 8 have their highlights. I'm sure one day I'll do some enormous 5-hour video retrospective on Game of Thrones the same way I did the Transformers movies, and maybe I'll actually be able to upload it in its entirety and not have it blocked by bullshit copyright claims. But as quickly as I can, here's why Game of Thrones is so good, and this does all tie into Hot D, I'm not just rambling. Number 1, the characters. Thrones has some of the greatest character writing in television history, and going forward when I refer to Thrones, I specifically refer to seasons 1 through 4, and about half of 5 and 6. Thrones has the biggest, most diverse, and interesting ensemble of characters ever, and it's the driving force of why it's such a fantastic series. Tyrion, Daenerys, Jon Snow, Arya, Catelyn, Tywin, Cersei, the Hound. I could go on and on and on and talk for days about how brilliant, intricate, and multifaceted everyone in the cast is, even down to the minor side characters like Osha or Pycelle. I felt more for characters like Gren, who's a side character in a side plot, than I do for anyone in this fucking season. The writing. The writing in the early seasons of Thrones should be studied in schools. Every line packs a punch. It's cunning, it's smart, it's clever. Every dialogue scene is either important to moving the plot forward or important to the characters. It's incredible. It's amazing how conversations can instantly switch between the dramatic to the thematically rich and nuanced to comedic, usually multiple times within one scene. The world. Westeros is the most richly detailed, intricately crafted, and immersive world in all of television. Every single set, every piece of armor, the way each and every character dresses and speaks is so richly detailed. When watching Game of Thrones, you don't feel like this is a bunch of actors in makeup on sound stages in a warehouse somewhere, like I do watching other fantasy shows. In every episode, you feel like you're part of this world with thousands of years of history and mysteries and secrets. It's amazing. And these are all aspects that mostly carry over into House of the Dragon. The show continues to be so richly detailed and immersive. Westeros feels alive and vibrant, and despite jumping through decades throughout Season 1 and even changing actors several times, you still really cared about these characters, even though when it comes down to it, these are all spoiled, power-hungry, rich monsters. Viserys Targaryen especially is one of the best characters in Thrones, and his absence from the show was greatly felt this season. Now, before I complain endlessly about why this fantasy show about dragons and ice zombies has left me saddened and disappointed because I'm a greatly privileged individual and these are the first world problems I have, let me go over what's good. Because as hyperbolic as I sound, there's a lot of great stuff here. This is still Game of Thrones, and even at its worst, let's be real, a bad season of Game of Thrones is still better than most of what's on TV. As always, the performances are a major highlight. Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke are both phenomenal and absolutely chew the scenery of every scene they are in, despite both of their characters being wasted this season. Matt Smith, again, is so much fun to watch as Daemon Targaryen, and his story this season allows him to get pretty unhinged at points. Tom Glynn Carney was the biggest surprise here. I'll talk more about Aegon in a bit, but truly, he was the standout this season. I also enjoy Ewan Mitchell as Aemond. He goes full-on anime villain, and his scenes are always very entertaining. The visuals and production design are fantastic. This is one of the most cinematic, beautifully shot shows out there. The sets are fantastic, the locations they shoot in are gorgeous. You still feel like you're ingrained into this world, which is one of the most important things to get right in Thrones. And while the visuals, for whatever reason, pale in comparison to what was accomplished in the later seasons of Thrones, the visual effects and CGI for the most part is excellent. It's so cool having spectacle on this level in a TV show. Game of Thrones was the biggest trendsetter in pushing television ahead in terms of the spectacle that's achievable within the medium, and I'm glad for the most part House of the Dragon is continuing that trend while not sacrificing the storytelling. It does that in different ways. The work that goes into creating a production of this size and scale is insane. I highly recommend watching the House That Dragons Built docuseries. It's all on YouTube. It really gives you a new appreciation for the show and makes you feel extra bad that the work of all these people is wasted on sloppy writing. I have some gripes with the technical aspects of this show. While the CG dragons look great, the dragon riding effects look shoddy. It's not as bad as when Daenerys rides Drogon at the end of Season 5. It took a long time for Thrones to really get good at the dragon riding effects, but it's still giving Star Wars prequels a bit. I'm a bit mixed on the color grading. It's going for a way more intense color grade than Thrones had. For the most part, it looks very cinematic, but at points it can look very washed out and drab and visually uninteresting, especially in comparison to how expressive Game of Thrones was. However, my biggest gripe with the look of this show is by far that ugly, shallow focus depth of field effect that's really prevalent depending on the episode. They've crafted these incredible, intricate sets and are shooting in these amazing locations, but then they go and blur out half the fucking image. It looks like shit. In many scenes, it looks like these actors are being filmed in front of green screens, but they're not actually. And it's a problem that's worse in some episodes, but not even present in others. Also, the score by Ramin Djawadi is always good. So good. He's going for a way different tone here than the big orchestral epicness of Thrones' score, but it's just as effective in its own way. Story-wise, there's some good stuff here. As a whole, the first 4 episodes were great. They were paced very well, and the plot was constantly moving forward. The writing is by far at its best in the first half of the season. The characters are the most interesting, and there's a real sense of urgency as things get more and more riled up between the two sides following the death of Aegon's son, which leads to Kristen sending Eric to kill Rhaenyra at Dragonstone, which gives us probably the best scene in the season. This fight is awesome. Cole then joins up with Gwaine Hightower, who was one of the best and frustratingly underused characters this season, and they march out with an army to start uniting houses to the Hightower cause against Rhaenyra. The big set piece of episode 3 being Rhaenyra sneaking into the Sept for a secret talk with Alicent. And I actually don't mind this scene. Both women are so conflicted as to how they feel about each other, knowing war is essentially inevitable at this point, and their attempts at preventing it from happening are futile. We have this one last meeting before the realm is plunged into war, and both must do whatever they must do to protect their families regardless of their personal feelings towards each other. It's a perfect final moment between these two characters who have so much history intertwined between each other, and it's a great note to end on their relationship with before the realm is plunged into war. And this perfectly leads into episode 4 and the Battle of Rook's Rest, the first major battle we've seen outside of that one skirmish in the Stepstones in season 1. It's also the first time we've really seen dragon combat between dragon riders, and it is spectacular. It's epic, and outside of some green screens, it looks incredible. We've always heard about how terrifying of an existential threat dragon warfare is throughout both House of the Dragon and Thrones, and this battle fully encapsulates the horrifying dread and death and destruction that results from it. And the episode ends with Aemon taking Aegon out of commission and killing Rhaenys, which gives us the first major character death of the season. It's perfect. The feeling and build-up and rising tension hits its climax in this episode. The first half of the season is a fully satisfying storytelling arc. And herein lies the problem with this season. From this point onward, the story essentially has nowhere to go and hardly progresses at all across the last 4 episodes. We have a great first half of a season here. It's clear the most amount of effort on behalf of the writers went towards getting them right. Then we have episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8. And if I'm being generous, these last 4 episodes should have been 2 at most. Now I'm moving into my complaints. By far the biggest issue with this season that's received the most vocal criticism from nearly every viewer is that the pacing is really bad. At 8 episodes, this season feels both rushed and extremely sluggish, with very, very little story progression. Lots of repetition, generally uninteresting writing or straight up character assassinations that betray entire arcs that have been set up for so long now. Entire episodes will come and go and leave you feeling like maybe one or two scenes were actually important and move the plot forward. Like, sure, the endpoints where these characters eventually end up is cool, except for her. I love Daemon rallying the Riverlands to Rhaenyra's cause. I love the idea of Aegon fleeing Westeros after Rhaenyra is about to attack King's Landing. I love that Rhaenyra seems to be finally, actually becoming a crazy Targaryen queen. But getting there takes so long for no reason, and that marketing does not help. A big part of why this season is so lackluster and uninteresting is because they fucking decimated Rhaenyra's character. Pretty much every single episode is the same with her, outside of the first. The first episode gave us that mad, angry, but emotionally repressed queen that we were expecting from the season 1 finale. She marches in so full of hate and anger and sadness immediately following the death of her son and demands Aemon's head. It's fucking awesome. Emma Darcy is so good when she's actually given fucking shit to work with. Then I guess she goes off and grieves for her dead child off screen because from episode 2 onward she's completely fine. And over and over and over we get the same scenes with her. Rhaenyra yells to her council that she wants to take action and fly into battle or something, and they tell her no, it's too dangerous, so she stays at Dragonstone and complains about being useless. Episode 3 is an anomaly because she actually shows some agency and does what she wants to do. Then episode 4, Rhaenyra wants to ride to battle. They say no, and she complains. Episode 5, Rhaenyra wants to ride out and do something. Then they tell her no, and she complains. Episode 6, the same fucking thing. Episode 7 was another glimpse into the Rhaenyra we should have had since the first episode, with her burning all these dozens of poor innocent small folk in hopes that she can get at least 2 new dragon riders. That's cool. It gave me a lot of hope that she'd start being an interesting character now, until that hope was immediately squandered by episode 8, where she reverts back to that boring, passive, uninteresting mope with zero agency we've seen wearing the face of Rhaenyra since episode 2.
They put the means to victory in your hands.
And yet, to claim it, I must strike. And in striking, I doom thousands to their deaths. I do not believe my father would have wished this. No.
Rhaenyra does nothing this season. Like, think about it. Sure, sneaking into King's Landing was her idea, but that led to nothing. She doesn't order Rhaenys to fight at Rook's Rest like she does in the book. Instead, Rhaenys volunteers. Jace was the one who came up with the idea to get bastards to ride the unclaimed dragons. Jace also got the North and the Freys to side with Rhaenyra. Daemon was the one who rallied the Riverlands to get her an army. Mysaria weaponized the small folk and caused a riot. Like, give Rhaenyra something to do. She's the main character. No, instead she needs to stand and stare angrily into the distance and pout about how she can't do anything. It's so fucking boring. Why would you make Rhaenyra so boring? And then when she's finally making moves and is finally getting ready to attack the Greens back, the season ends. Great job, guys. This is totally so much better than if you just followed the fucking book. And dear God, don't even get me started on those scenes with her and Mysaria. I'll talk about her character a little later. I don't want this video to be too long, but Jesus, every scene with these two is torture.
Surely it was not the only possibility. Might there not be others among the highborn of the Seven Kingdoms?
And who will be so foolish as to try, after hearing what befell Sir Stefan? I will look again. But Darklyn had the most likely claim.
There is good news to be had. The small folk of King's Landing are listening. They were ready enough to hear. The usurpers have abandoned them. They are hungry, and they need someone to blame.
Will it be enough?
We have laid the kindling only. Tonight we will light it. and watch it begin to flare.
When it does, Aemond will put it down with force.
That will make it rise the hotter. He cannot destroy his own city.
Neither can they overthrow him.
Maybe not, but it is harder to wage war abroad when you must also keep peace at home.
Then let us see to our plan.
If I may, Your Grace, this becomes you.
You've got boring-ass Rhaenyra doing nothing, complaining to this one-dimensional, personality-less robot about how she's doing nothing, while she just glazes her about being the most rightful fit for ruler since she cares about the people, and she has a good heart. I don't fucking know. Girls gotta stick together or something. It's just so frustrating that they've squandered the potential to build Rhaenyra up into one of the most fascinating characters in the series, and they're ruining her character by framing her as this tragic, oh, I just want peace, I don't want war, but sometimes I'll be a mad Targaryen queen, but most of the time I'm going to sit around and complain. I'm focusing on Rhaenyra because, as the main character, her passivity and removal of her urgency reaches out and infects nearly everyone else. Her son died, and then she's over it. Rhaenys dies, and there's not even a funeral scene or a single moment spent on Rhaenyra being upset that she just lost arguably her most valuable military asset. She spends more time talking about Steffan Darklin's death than she does her own aunt's. Same thing with Alicent. Her grandson was murdered, and she doesn't give a fuck past the second episode. It doesn't motivate her, it doesn't make her want revenge. She cries a little, which is more than what we got with Rhaenyra reacting to Rhaenys' death. And then nothing comes of it. You guys remember how fucking crazy Alicent went after Aemon got his eye cut out? Her entire grandson just died here, and there's none of that. None of that. She does not care. Nothing comes from Blood and Cheese. Instead, we get 5 episodes of her moping around the Red Keep, upset that her sons are terrible, or how she doesn't have any political power anymore, until she ups and chooses to betray her entire family, which I'll get into later. We get more screen time dedicated to her going camping and swimming than we do Rhaenyra mourning Rhaenys, her greatest military asset. Like, I can't get over that. You idiots didn't think about that. No, instead have her kiss Mysaria, which is never brought up again outside that one scene. That's way more important to show. Alright, let me take a step back here. Alicent has nothing to do this entire fucking season. Trying to frame this season as Team Rhaenyra versus Team Alicent was a big mistake, because Alicent is not a character we should be spending this much time on. This is a war between Aegon and Rhaenyra's succession claims, and when Alicent is removed from the small council, she has nothing to do. She's no longer a player in this game. But they keep giving her pointless scenes so that they can match Alicent's screen time with Rhaenyra's, in order to convey this message that it's all about them and their friendship. We don't need all these scenes of her moping and taking baths and moping and swimming. Like, we get it the first time. She's fucking upset. We know. Why are we dedicating so much screen time to her? Meanwhile, it's been 2 entire seasons and we've never had a scene with Daeron, her entire other kid that the showrunners forgot about. We've also never seen Dreamfire, Helena's dragon, who, by the way, is the dragon that lays Daenerys' dragon eggs. Which, of course, by the way, they changed that to Syrax, Rhaenyra's dragon being the one who lays Daenerys' dragon eggs. Ugh. We should have had way more scenes with Cole and Gwaine. Jace should have been in the north, uniting the northern houses with Cregan Stark all season. Corlys should have had something to do. There's just so many other things we should have gotten this season that the show just does not focus on, because they think that Rhaenyra and Alicent and fucking doing the same shit over and over again is more important than, I don't know, maybe giving Baela a character, or like fleshing out what the fuck is her name? Rhaena, giving her an actual character, maybe? I've waited as long as I could before bringing it up, but every scene with Corlys this season is a fucking joke, a jest, a prank on the audience pulled by the showrunners. This shit is so much more stupid and boring and unnecessary than anything with Rhaenyra and Alicent. So in season 1, for 3 years straight, Corlys was off fighting a war against the Triarchy off-screen, where he's gravely wounded and almost dies, but is saved by this guy, Alan of Hull. But turns out Alan is actually the bastard son of Corlys, and they both know this, but neither wants to talk about it. So every single episode, Corlys wanders onto this one dock where they're building or cleaning this one ship, and he talks to Alan, and he's like, hey, thanks for saving me, I'll give you a promotion for doing so. And then Alan's like, no, I don't want that. And then Corlys leaves. And then the next episode, Corlys wanders back onto that dock where they're cleaning or building the same exact ship, and they have the same conversation. The next episode, Corlys wanders back onto that dock, and the same fucking thing happens. The same fucking thing happens like 7 times. There's one episode where Corlys doesn't go to that shipyard and talk to Alan, and that's when he's mourning the death of his wife, and he's like a little teary-eyed and is drinking some wine. And then in the next episode, he's completely fine. Like, his wife of 30 years just died in war, and he's acting like his dog just got put down. The writer's refusal to have these characters be emotional and human is one of the biggest fucking problems with this show. And I'll talk more about it later, as if this video isn't going to be long enough already. And what do you know, as soon as he's over Rhaenys, he's back at the dock having the same slight variation of the same conversation, back at the same dock where they're building or cleaning this same ship. Oh, but he names the ship after Rhaenys, that's so sweet. And then in the end, when we're getting all these epic shots of armies marching, and we finally see Corlys's fleet for the first fucking time in this entire show, he's in a little canoe instead of on the ship we've been watching get cleaned or built for 8 episodes straight. Like, if there is one perfect moment to represent the quality of this entire season, this is it. Corlys was most likely a major afterthought in the writer's room. Like, following season 1, both his legitimate kids are dead, one of which he blames Rhaenyra for, the other he blames Daemon for. Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon all had a part in killing his brother. He feels like he's lost so much to Rhaenyra. He fucking hates her, but Rhaenys is like, no, it's okay because she's trying to avoid war. And then Rhaenys fucking dies in Rhaenyra's war, and he's not upset, he's not angry. Then Rhaenyra names him Hand to the Queen, and he does nothing. I can't think of a more wasted character this season. He should be a powder keg ready to fucking explode at Rhaenyra. He should not be happy, but nope, nothing, absolutely nothing. There are so many side characters who are completely sidelined, and all the time we have per episode is wasted on these 3 NPCs, Rhaenyra, Alicent, and Corlys. We need more Jace, more Baela. Maybe if they trimmed some of these stupid fucking Corlys scenes out, we could have had more time to develop Rhaena and Jane Arryn so we actually care about that story. The people gaslighting themselves into thinking this was a satisfying season of television because, you know, at least it isn't season 8 of Thrones, will resort to using the same few responses toward people criticizing this season. There's the classic, you have a low attention span, TikTok brain, you can't process something that's a slow burn. This ties into the other response, you only want action and battles, and Game of Thrones has never been that. It's always been slower and methodical with a much greater emphasis on character writing, political scheming, and nuanced dialogue than it ever was on action and battles and sword fights, and this is very true. But what these people don't remember or don't realize is that Game of Thrones was never this slow. It never wasted this much time on repetitive bullshit and zero plot progression. Thrones has always been briskly paced with dozens of different things happening at all times. The overarching story is constantly moving forward with all these dozens of little pieces that all push it forward. Let's take a look at Season 2 of Game of Thrones, which is very similar in structure to Season 2 of Hot D, with Westeros being in the early stages of war, and much of the season is spent moving troops around and building armies to support both the Lannister and Stark causes. You've got the Starks versus the Lannisters, just like Team Green versus Team Black. Robb goes around to Lannister Holdfast after Lannister Holdfast, taking out camps, pushing his army slowly towards King's Landing, while building up his reputation as the king in the north, while Tywin doesn't march on Robb and instead holds down all the forts and lets Robb come to him. Since Northerners have so much land to cover, and once Robb's men leave the north and enter the south, Tywin will have the upper hand. But in doing so, he's inadvertently starving out King's Landing because all the kingdom's money is going towards the war effort, and Joffrey, Cersei, and the royal family are all forced to deal with the civil unrest caused by all this. All while across the bay, Stannis Baratheon is building a fleet to storm King's Landing, which they also must deal with, but without the army that Tywin has since he's away. And while Robb is marching south, he's leaving the north undefended, which allows the Greyjoys to sail in from the Iron Islands and take Winterfell, capturing Bran and Rickon and putting Robb on a two-front war. All while Catelyn is trying to rally Renly Baratheon to Robb's cause, and eventually there's some personal drama between Robb and her after she frees Jaime Lannister, his biggest bargaining chip, in an attempt to save her daughters who are hostages in King's Landing. And that's just what's happening in the war. You also got Daenerys in Essos and Jon Snow beyond the wall, and so much more with so many more characters, every storyline running parallel to each other. Exciting and new stuff happening in every episode. This is fucking Game of Thrones. This is what makes it the best show ever. Season 2 is one of the most engaging, exciting, and entertaining seasons of television ever made, and there's only one battle. With all this war and all these armies, there's only one actual battle, and it's in the second to last episode of the season. One day I'll make a video on Blackwater and why it's the greatest episode of Game of Thrones, but not anytime soon. Now let's take a look at Season 2 of House of the Dragon. The first 4 episodes, for the most part, are of similar pace. Lots of build-up, lots of pieces being moved around, and characters making moves to advance the story. Daemon accidentally getting Aegon's son killed when Rhaenyra just wanted Aemon dead, leading Aegon to send an assassin to kill Rhaenyra. Then Daemon goes to Harrenhal to rally the Riverlands to Rhaenyra's cause, but also possibly to overthrow Rhaenyra himself. Then we hit this blockade, where the showrunners tell us, oops, that's enough for this season, we gotta hit that 8-episode quota, when we have maybe 6 episodes worth of content. We're adapting only 1 chapter of Fire and Blood, and we're stretching it out as thinly as we possibly can. And, of course, we'll still have the season prematurely end without an actual finale. So here are a dozen scenes of Rhaenyra doing the same thing over and over again. Here are a dozen scenes of Alicent doing the same thing over and over again. Here are a dozen scenes of Corlys doing the same thing over and over again. And a dozen scenes of Daemon doing the same thing over and over again. Oh look, all this payoff is happening. Here you go, maybe all this buildup will be worth it in the long run. The armies we've been building for 8 episodes are finally marching. All the dragon riders are about to take off. We're actually about to get some payoffs? Aha, boo-hoo, fuck you, wait 2 years, you piece of shit. What'd you expect, something satisfying to happen this season? LOL, we're spending $20 million per episode, but we still can't top what Game of Thrones was doing 10 years ago for less than half that. You want good storytelling? Read the books, you dork. Hell yeah, girl power, defeat the patriarchy, hashtag Rhaenyscent, yeah, slap the men, we hate the men. Sell out your own son who you groomed from birth to be king when he never wanted to get beheaded by Rhaenyra. Hell yeah, girls get it done. Can you imagine if Game of Thrones Season 2 was helmed by these showrunners and followed a similar structure as this season? All of these characters would instantly stop caring about Ned Stark's death the episode after it happened. Catelyn and Robb would immediately lose all urgency, and we'd have an entire season of them standing around and talking in one camp about how they don't really want war, and that they should try every option to sue for peace with the Lannisters before they start fighting. While Cersei mopes around the Red Keep doing nothing for an entire season because Joffrey is crazy. Then at the end, she teleports into Catelyn's tent and tells Cat that she'd let her and Robb storm King's Landing and behead Joffrey so that she can go escape to Essos and live in peace with Marcella. Because at the end of the day, all the other shit going on is just background noise, and this story is really all about these 2 women trying to figure it out.
There's so much in play. There are armies, there are dragons, there's castle strongholds and political maneuvering, but at the end of the day, it comes down to these 2 women trying to figure it out.
And then Catelyn makes out with Brienne out of nowhere, and it's never mentioned again after it happens. And the majority of the show's screen time would be dedicated to these 2 stories, Cersei and Catelyn, while Daenerys, Jon Snow, and Sansa are sidelined to a few minutes each episode. Tyrion just paces around the same dock, talking to one person about nothing for 7 episodes straight. Arya isn't even in the season, but we get a quick glimpse of her at the very end, right before it ends. And Theon's entire story, going back to the Iron Islands, being reborn as a Greyjoy, and taking Winterfell, happens entirely off-screen. While Tywin Lannister trips at Harrenhal for 6 episodes straight, we first get introduced to Stannis Baratheon and Melisandre in the final episode of the season. And the season ends for 2 years, right before he's about to land at King's Landing for the Battle of Blackwater, with a big montage at the end promising, yeah, maybe we'll finally get around to the war that we clearly set up as starting in the season 1 finale. Oh, and if you hate it, if you think that's boring and unsatisfying and makes no sense and squanders all the potential the show had after its first season, well, that's just because you're a loser with a TikTok brain who can't process a slow-moving show, and you probably just want action and nothing else because you're a big dumb baby. And that's exactly what House of the Dragon Season 2 is. The problem is absolutely not the fact that there is quote-unquote just no action, and it's all people talking this season. The problem is that these characters are fucking boring, and generally what they're talking about is nothing of note. I could easily watch 10 episodes of Tyrion in King's Landing, going around tricking and scheming the people around him. I could watch Arya and Tywin talk about the politics of Westeros for fucking hours. Give me a dozen scenes of Varys and Littlefinger having conversations about power. This is some of the best stuff in the entirety of Game of Thrones. The problem isn't that there's no action and the show spends too long on characters talking. It's that the writing is completely uninteresting. Do we need 7 episodes of Corlys pacing around this dock while they're cleaning the same fucking ship the entire season? Seeing his bastards and grumbling a few lines about how he wants to help them because they helped him during some off-screen event? Do we need a dozen scenes of Alicent being like, oh, my sons are terrible people over and over again? Do we need Rhaenyra complaining about how she's not allowed to fight and must stay at Dragonstone over and over again? Yeah, let's have another fucking scene where Alicent mopes around upset at the fact she has no power anymore for the 4th time this season, but let's not spend any time on Rhaenyra grieving the death of her aunt. That's not important. We don't want to humanize her character or feed into her motivations for revenge, especially not after losing her son to the Greens. She'll just forget about Rhaenys like she did Luke after the 2nd episode.
She was a fool to go alone. What if Aemond were to happen upon her?
Then I would pity Aemond.
Oh, Rhaenys. You really think Rhaenyra would just snap and kill Aemond if she sees him? Okay. Oh look, Rhaenyra's drawn Aemond and Vhagar out of King's Landing. They're right out in the open. She has 3 fucking dragons all ready to fight. There's nobody around so she doesn't have to risk civilian casualties. She's been complaining about not being allowed to act and fight all fucking season, and she has an opportunity to do so right here. This is a golden opportunity for her to get the revenge she's wanted since episode 1. He's right there. You have 3 dragons. This is the first time she's ever had the upper hand against Aemond. Go. You can go. Go. Kill him. You can get him. Kill him, Rhaenyra. Oh, okay. No, fucking never mind. Yeah, just stand there and stare at him and let him fly away instead, where he'll then go and murder thousands of innocent people immediately after. Are you serious? Are you for fucking real right now? He killed Luke. He killed Rhaenys. And you're just gonna let him go? You're just gonna stand and stare at him instead? Fuck off, this stupid ass fucking show, dude. Fuck you, Ryan Condal. Season 1 Rhaenyra would immediately fly out with her 3 dragons and burn that motherfucker to a crisp. There is no reason why we shouldn't have gotten a dragon fight here. It's literally set up earlier that she says that Syrax is quicker and that she thinks she could take Aemond in a fight. If Rhaenyra flew out on Syrax and tried to kill Aemond here, but he narrowly gets away, but suffers some injuries or something, then it would have made so much more fucking sense as to why he'd burn Sharp Point in the next episode. Ah, whatever. Yeah, Rhaenyra, stand and stare at him like you've done all fucking season. Yeah, look how scared he is of her. She's so cool. This is so #girlboss. The writers are obsessed with portraying Rhaenyra as this saint, this tragic hero who can do no wrong, and all her faults are due to the men in her life who force her down this villainous route that she doesn't want to go down. She's perfect, she's innocent, she's supposed to rule, and it was stolen from her because of the patriarchy. Now she has to fight in this war she wants no part of, so she's going to stand around and complain and do nothing for an entire season. and then completely out of the blue, she'll do something super fucked up and horrible, and nobody says anything about it, and it's never brought up again, and it doesn't change her character at all. And in doing so, they've made her character so boring. She's not motivated by anything. She's in no rush to ever get anything done. And because of this, they've taken so much screen time away from the supporting cast and side characters who were so horribly underutilized this season. I can't believe this is the direction they chose to take her character following the finale of season 1. And relatively the same thing is done to Alicent's character, which I've been saving. If Rhaenyra is so uninteresting now, and Daemon, the big fan favorite character, is stuck at Harrenhal every episode, which I haven't even talked about yet, who is there to root for?
Of Dragonstone, there she sits across the bay on her rock, laughing at me. She's fucking laughing at me!
Now, I talked about Rhaenyra and Corlys and how they dragged down so much of this season. I briefly brought up Alicent a few times, and I'll go more into depth with her when I talk about the season finale. And I talked about the general episode structure and pacing. Now, I want to go through the major characters and what works and doesn't work about them, because at the end of the day, Game of Thrones is all about the characters. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it brings me so much joy that the writers have tried so hard to get you to hate the rival male characters to Team Black, and in doing so they've inadvertently created some of the most interesting and entertaining characters who have ended up becoming fan favorites. I'm specifically talking about Aegon and Aemon, but Daemon also fits this bill, who I'll get to. I swear on the old gods and the new when I say that Aegon and Aemon are the glue that holds this season together. Let's take a look at Aegon. Literally from birth, every single day of his life, he's been groomed to be king. By Otto, by Viserys, by Alicent. His entire life, everyone has only cared about trying to put him on the Iron Throne, with no actual regard to his personhood. He's even forced to marry his own sister. And so when he's grown, he's horribly behaved. He's violent, ill-tempered. He rapes women and sells his bastards to fighting pits. This plot point from season 1 was so excessive. Like, we get it. You want us to hate him. And when he finally does become king against all of his wishes, he finally gets what he wants. This man is touch-starved. He's never been shown genuine love. He's slapped around and beat constantly by his parents. And now as king, he gets the praise and gets the love from the people that he's never gotten from his family. And he's drawn to it like a moth unto a flame. As king, he tries to help out the small folk as much as he can, but he's constantly held back by Otto or by the economy being in shambles due to the war. But he helps the small folk anyway because this is all he wants. He wants to be loved. He wants to be appreciated. He doesn't really want to be the conqueror or the magnanimous. He wants to be the realm's delight. But he's still crass. He's still impulsive and cruel. He doesn't know how to process his emotions. And even though he means well, he's thrown into horrible situations that are beyond his control. He's picked apart and punished for crimes he didn't commit and forced to be part of this war he didn't start. His own son is murdered. He's burnt alive and crippled. His dick explodes. And then he's forced to leave the country because his mom sells him out to get beheaded. A real cherry on top after all the cruelty she's inflicted on him his entire life. When we were first introduced to Aegon as king, I wasn't looking forward to seeing much of his character. I was kind of thinking like, oh great, they're doing Joffrey and Ramsay again. But I was so surprised about how morally complex and complicated he ended up being. He's one of the only characters who has a sense of urgency. He doesn't just sit around and complain about sitting around. He's motivated, he takes action, he fires Otto, he rides into battle, he hangs the rat catchers. He does fucked up shit because he thinks it's right. And when he wants to be better and asks for help, he's immediately shut down by his mother. And then after everything, he receives the divine punishment for his actions. He's one of the only character who has had a full arc this season, and also one of the only people who is shown to be mourning and sad about the death of Jaehaerys. There's a reason why people have latched onto this character as much as they have, because he's one of the only fully fledged characters this season. And then you have Aemond, the younger brother of Aegon, who for his entire life has been living in the shadows of his much more underqualified sibling. Aemon received the love from his family, and he was able to live and pursue everything he wanted to because he wasn't the heir. But ironically, the one thing he wanted to do was be the heir and be king. He's worked his entire life towards a goal he'll never be able to achieve. Meanwhile, Aegon has only ever not wanted it, but got it anyway. Aemon is a warrior, Aemon is calm, cool, and decisive. Aemon is smarter, stronger, he rides the biggest dragon. But all the childhood bullying he received, getting his eye cut out and whatnot, has led to him carrying so much repressed anger and hatred with him everywhere, which erupts in this violent takeover of Aegon's throne at Rook's Rest. And when he finally becomes king, he finds himself on the losing side of the war and he starts to panic. Suddenly that calm, cool demeanor starts to slip and crack and begin to show. He has a weird mother complex, he can barely control Vhagar. He realizes that killing Luke was a big mistake, but he's not allowed to share any of that because he has to keep his persona going for everyone else, which only leads to him becoming more violent and more cruel. Back in peak Game of Thrones, characters like these were a dime a dozen. This is depth, this is what people want. We want these well-written, morally gray characters. Regular people being capable of both good and evil equally, and it's the world or circumstances around them that forces their hand in one direction or the other, is kind of the basis or main theme of the entirety of this series, of A Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. These are complicated people. There's a lot of history and backstory that weaves the tapestry of these people's personalities. It explains why they do what they do, why they behave the way they do, but I guess this level of thought-provoking character writing is too much for the Team Black NPCs who watch this show in a bar, or cheer when Rhaenyra and Mysaria kiss. Or watch Leslie Jones's watch-alongs on Instagram.
If you don't survive, you gonna be a crispy critter like a motherfucking burnt piece of chicken in a rotisserie. Standing there calm and shit, I will be shitting. I will be shitting so many motherfucking bricks. It will be another place for them fucking dragons to live. How many bricks I will be shitting.
I was joking about the second part. I'm glad these watch-alongs exist. And Aemon and Aegon stand out from the bunch because Alicent and Rhaenyra are the inverse of these people. They're so one note, so bland and uninteresting. Oh, I'm so innocent, I can do no wrong, I just want peace and all these evil men around me want war. Oh, I'm so innocent, I can do no wrong, my sons are terrible and evil and these horrible men just want war. Just, ignore that I'm kind of the reason why my kids are so bad. The showrunners forgot, so you can too. And now I have finally arrived at Daemon. The Rogue Prince, the fan favorite. Daemon's storyline is one of the bigger points of contention among viewers, and I have mixed feelings about it. He's very in character for the first 2 episodes, ordering the assassination of Aemon, but letting the assailants know that if he isn't found, then any son would do. Or that's implied at least. In all his self-reflection, he never shows any remorse for this incident, so we have no idea. But there is some tomfoolery at foot amongst this castle, and he's plagued with dreams and visions of his past mistakes, which forces him into dour self-reflections, all while settling a conflict between 2 minor houses in the Riverlands. And he is here for 6 episodes straight, having visions, dealing with the River Lords, having more visions, dealing with the River Lords more, having more visions, dealing with the River Lords again. I definitely get the disdain towards the storyline, but honestly, this was some of the most enjoyable stuff this season. There's a lot of fun to be had with Daemon going back and forth with himself. On one hand, he wants to be king more than anything, and is willing to do anything for that title, including usurping his own wife. And on the other hand, he's being forced to realize that being king would never truly suit him. He's a tyrannical leader. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to rally behind him. He's a terrible politician, and at the end of this day, he comes to that realization. Basically that he's not the main character, and he should sit back and know his place. This slow, gradual build, political scheming, these fun, wacky Riverland characters, it's fun stuff. It's the most the show has actually felt like Game of Thrones all season. I also love how we really start to lean into the magic and supernatural aspects of this world. There are witches and ghosts, possibly. There's a green man, which I only know about through listening to the Alt Swift X episode analysis podcasts. And the resolution is very satisfying. There were aspects that I don't like. For one, 6 episodes, really. Many of these scenes could have been condensed or even cut out. And like with Corlys, I really hate how pretty much the entire Blackwood and Bracken conflict is centered around events that are off-screen. It just makes the whole story way less interesting and engaging than it should be. The writers are also very pick and choosy about what Daemon regrets and mourns over. He feels guilty about forcing Rhaenyra down this path of war. He regrets not being more loving towards his brother. He sees his former wife who burned herself for a bit, but he never once thinks about the wife who he murdered with a rock. But I like to think that he only really cares about his immediate family, so things like this don't matter to him. And I gotta say, I like it conceptually, but this vision scene is very frustrating. I don't know why these showrunners keep spoiling the show to the audience, but through the guise of, oh, it's the prophecy. Like, not everyone has read the books or has rewatched Game of Thrones recently and remembers Joffrey spoiling the end of the war. I don't want to be told that Daemon is going to die at Harrenhal in some future battle. There's a difference between foreshadowing these events or implying them and then just directly being told what's going to happen. Although Daemon's little vision isn't nearly as egregious as Helena straight up telling us Aemond is going to die at God's Eye, going from subtle hints and clues to just blatantly spelling it out. I like the idea of Daemon seeing the future and realizing he's just this small cog in the machine, but did we need to see White Walkers? Especially because, like, this White Walker looks so cheap. Like, come on, look, how was this show looking so much better in season 2 10 years ago? Come on. Did we need to see Daenerys? Do we need him to say winter is coming? To me, this just screams desperate fan service. Remember Game of Thrones? Like, yeah, I remember Thrones. I remember season 8, how Winter and the Long Night was the most mishandled, disappointing, and unsatisfying storyline in television history. Thanks for the reminder. But other than that gripe, I like Daemon at Harrenhal. I think it's fun. It's very slow, a bit too slow at points, but it feels purposeful and methodical in a way very few other plots have felt this season. And now I'm going to try and speed through the rest of the side characters and minor characters we have here. I do enjoy Kristen Cole's character for the most part. I think it's interesting how he's so unanimously hated when he's one of the few morally ambiguous and layered characters we have left, as well as being our only boots on the ground perspective from someone having to fight in this war. He's a foreigner from Dorne who worked his way up the Red Keep from nothing all the way to the head of the King's Guard. He believed in honor and integrity until Rhaenyra in a way kinda coerced him into having sex with her, breaking his Kingsguard vows of remaining celibate, which is punishable by death. So then he obviously falls in love with Rhaenyra. He fights and kills for her, only for her to cast him aside because she doesn't really feel the same way about him. And then she goes and fathers 2 bastards from another man, and he feels greatly rejected. Now a similar situation is happening again with him having sex with Alicent and falling in love with her, only for that relationship falling apart due to the guilt he feels for not protecting Jaehaerys and getting mega PTSD from watching hundreds of people burn to death right in front of him. And the actions he took previously to defend Rhaenyra's honor have sparked an entire war between the Beesburys and Hightowers, which happens entirely off-screen. So by the end of the season, he's gone full nihilist and loses all motivation to continue living. It's a little rushed, but I think it's a solid character arc. He knows at the end of the day he's nothing more than a pawn to be used and pushed around by more powerful people. It's good stuff. There are problems though. For one, I think skipping over the beginning of him and Alicent's relationship was a big mistake. Alicent taking up a secret lover following the death of her husband, particularly the former lover of her best friend, could have been rich with drama, but as soon as the season starts, we're already in the middle of it. It should be big for Alicent that after having been in a marriage with someone 30 years older than her, which started when she was like 15, she now is able to be with someone her own age, of her own choosing. that's ripe with interesting drama and could really show how much Alicent has changed herself following the death of Viserys, which could better explain what happens at the end, but it's lacking that drama. And a lot of Kristen's development either happens off-screen or feels a little rushed. I enjoy this final scene with him. The dialogue is great, it's wonderfully acted, but it lacks any build-up. Following Rook's rest, he's definitely distraught, but it seems like he gets over it and is relatively fine again, only for the next time we see him, he's going full brooding nihilist incel. We should have been shown a little more of his transition to this point, but it still generally works. I really loved all the scenes with him and Gwaine. These two needed way more screen time. Game of Thrones is always at its most engaging whenever two characters who both have fundamentally different worldviews or personalities are put together in a scene. Think Jaime and Brienne, Arya and the Hound, Varys and Littlefinger, also Varys and Tyrion, and Varys and Ned too. Really any early season Varys scenes. And Gwaine and Cole have a similar vibe. Gwaine being a spoiled, privileged, rich kid, and Cole being a rags-to-riches foreigner who's had to make it all on his own. The brief interactions we get between these two are always great, and we should have gotten way more. But, you know, alas, the show is occupied with more important things. There's not much to say about Otto since he's gone after episode 2, but I love Otto. He's one of the best characters in the show. He's the closest we have to a Tywin Lannister figure, but if Tywin was also kind of a chump. We really should have gotten some fucking scene of him having to deal with the Beesbury Revolution in Old Town. That would have been awesome, and that really should have been his whole story for the season once he's kicked out of King's Landing. But, you know, that could have been engaging and fun and entertaining. Nah. What do you think this is, Game of Thrones? This is House of the Dragon, mate. Take a fourth scene of Corlys at the docks instead. Larys was so fucking underused this season. In season 1, he was so interesting and mysterious and creepy. They set him up to be a more cruel, depraved, and evil version of Varys or Littlefinger. His motives and goals are so ambiguous and unclear, but from this season, I really think Condal just had no idea what to do with him. It really feels like post-season 4 Littlefinger, where the writers had no clue what to do with Littlefinger, so he just became really stupid. I enjoy his scenes with Aegon. He seems genuinely sympathetic towards him, and they have an interesting dynamic, but nothing of note happens. Jace and Baela are two of the biggest missed opportunities to flesh out Team Black past boring-ass Rhaenyra and stuck-at Harrenhal Daemon and fucking Oblivion NPC Corlys. There's brief moments and flashes of Jace being interesting, but neither of these characters have anything to do. Jace should have spent the whole season in the north with Cregan Stark, going around to the different northern houses and uniting them to fight for Rhaenyra, the same way Daemon is trying to unite the Riverlands. How fucking cool would it have been to see Cregan and Jace venture around the north, seeing all the different northern houses and all the little misadventures they could have gotten up to, trying to appease these northern lords. In the book, Jace and Cregan's relationship is a big deal. It plays a much more important part of the story. They become fast friends, possibly lovers. It's hinted that maybe Jace had a secret relationship with Cregan's bastard sister, which, if adapted, would have led to some really interesting drama between him and Baela, who he's betrothed to. Like, sure, it's cool seeing the wall in the first scene of the first episode, but that's it? This entire fucking show is like 3 castles. Everything looks the same. It's so repetitive. Imagine if they added the North and Old Town into the mix, and Jace dealing with the northern houses, and Otto dealing with the Beesbury Revolution. How awesome would that have been? How cool, how entertaining. It would have made Alicent, Corlys, and Rhaenyra's endless scenes of doing nothing so much more bearable if we had these side stories going on. There's no need for me to waste time talking about Baela since she's such a non-character. She has no personality, no motivations, she does nothing. Like, I forget that this is supposed to be Daemon's daughter because there's no overlap in personality or anything like there is in the books between the two of them. She's totally wasted in this story. There's also Rhaena, who, like Corlys, is one of the biggest jokes this season. Every time she's on screen, it feels like the show wants to move on from her as fast as it can. Every single scene with her barely lasts a minute, and Jane Eyre is also a total non-character. Just fucking hell, these scenes at the Vale are so bad, and I hate how they cut the book character Nettles in favor of this. Let me reiterate, they cut Nettles, a low-born commoner with no ties to old Valyria, who of her own volition tames Sheepstealer by feeding it sheep, completely casting aside all the notions of Targaryens being the only people able to claim dragons. She fights for Rhaenyra, but gets involved in a secret love affair with Daemon, which causes Rhaenyra to demand Nettles' head, but escapes Westeros and lives out her days peacefully in secret in Essos. And they cut her for this. And now I will do what the show does with Rhaena and just move on. Mysaria is one of the worst characters in the show. She is so dull, so uninteresting, so boring, completely lacking in personality and intrigue. Every time she pops up on screen, she drags the entire scene down with her. She could have easily been the female Varys or Littlefinger. Her character has so much potential, but they squander it by making her a blank slate who just blindly adores Rhaenyra. The only way I think they can redeem her is if they just reveal that she's a spy, or maybe in collusion with Larys, which is why she's such a Rhaenyra glazer. I don't know. I think Ulf, Hugh, and Alan are alright, Ulf being the most interesting by far. He's like the Hound with how he just doesn't care about anything. He always says what's on his mind no matter who he's talking to. That's fun. He was alright. I was hoping there'd be some strife between him and Rhaenyra. I was waiting for a scene in episode 8 where Hugh learns about Rhaenyra's blockade of King's Landing, which inadvertently led to the death of his daughter. There could have been some real good drama there. Maybe next season we'll get that. Fucking, I don't know. I don't know anymore. At this point, I don't trust any of these fucking writers to create any interesting conflict or drama that isn't pulled directly from the books or is carried over from season 1. I'm gonna move on now. When I started writing this video, I thought it'd be like 15-20 minutes at most. And now, I need to talk about the finale. I was really optimistic. When watching it week to week, I thought to myself, yeah, this season has been very inconsistent and middling and kinda boring, but the red sewing was very cool, at least. And if they stick the landing and deliver a really awesome finale, I'd be willing to forgive many of this season's flaws. You know, season 5 of Game of Thrones was also very middling and had many problems, but good lord did it stick that landing. Those last 3 episodes are fucking excellent. I could forgive that entire Dorne storyline because we got Hardhome and Mother's Mercy at the end. And so I was really fucking hopeful that this episode would be something great, epic, memorable, interesting, that it would fix or, you know, put duct tape over some of those bigger problems that this season had. And then I watched it. The final episode of House of the Dragon Season 2 is possibly the worst season finale in all of Game of Thrones. Yes, I'm talking about the Iron Throne level dog shit, and it's without a doubt the worst episode of this entire show. Episode 8, The Queen Who Ever Was, give me a fucking break, is where every problem this season comes together full force. It exemplifies all the worst aspects of the show. It really is the final nail in this coffin. It's the big, grandiose confirmation that, yes, this season is a total, pointless, underwhelming disaster that has amounted to nothing. Season 1 ended with the Targaryens and the Hightowers on the brink of war, with Luke's death being the final domino to fall into place and ignite this powder keg that erupts into the bloodiest and most brutal civil war Westeros has ever seen. And Season 2 has ended with the Targaryens and the Hightowers on the brink of war again. Sure, we're more close to the actual war now than we were 8 entire episodes ago, but that's it. We got some armies marching and characters we've never seen before finally getting introduced in a fucking montage at the very end of the season, and that's it? Oh look, Otto, who we haven't seen since episode 2, he's in a cage somewhere? Why? Oh, look, it's Daron. Oh my god, it's Daron. I sure can't wait to finally see Daron in the penultimate season of the show. I genuinely can't wrap my head around how anyone thought this finale was a good idea. Yes, I know, budget cuts brought on by Warner Bros. Is the reason for this season not having a real finale. As the actual planned finale that would have been in the last 2 episodes, the Battle of the Gullet and the Storming of King's Landing, were cut and are going to be moved to the beginning of Season 3, which, by the way, is also planned to only have 8 episodes, so I'm sure this decision won't lead to some disastrous pacing problems then. But the writers absolutely could have worked with what they got and delivered a far more satisfying finale, even without the battles. They could have rewrote and restructured this episode from the ground up so that even though it's unsatisfying and there is no war yet, it still could have been somewhat conclusive. First and foremost, why the fuck are we spending a huge portion of this episode in a brand new location we've never seen, with characters we've never seen, following a minor character? Oh my god, this shit was embarrassing when they're talking about this ferocious, fearless captain of the Triarchy's fleet, and Philosophy Tube walks out. Give me a fucking break. I know I gotta walk on eggshells here. It's hard to criticize this stupid, one-dimensional character who was hopelessly miscast and gives by far the worst performance we've seen in this whole show without being accused of some bad things. But fuck off with this YouTuber cameo bullshit. Are we really doing this in Game of Thrones? A YouTuber cameo in Game of Thrones? At least they knew to keep Ed Sheeran to just one little scene in Season 7 of Thrones. I know for a fucking fact that there is no fucking way Philosophy Tube was the best, most talented actress who auditioned for this role. This battle-hardened military commander, Philosophy Tube? Are you kidding? You need someone gruff and grizzled. Look at Yara in Thrones. You need someone like that. I don't even think Yara is that great of a character, but I bought her as a strong military commander. And then there's that mud fight scene. Jesus Christ, we have officially entered Season 5 Sand Snakes, Jaime and Bronn in Dorne level bad. A low that I hadn't even thought this season had sunk to yet. Oh, and they do that one joke where someone says something menacing and threatening and it's serious for a second, but then they laugh and it's all a joke.
So you reject the hospitality of my house? A jest, my lord.
Look, here's a better version of the same thing.
You got fat.
This all could have worked much better if it wasn't crammed into this season finale. And Tylan and Essos trying to convince the Triarchy to fight for the Greens should have been set in motion like 5 episodes ago. Maybe cut out one of those stupid fucking Corlys scenes and move these scenes into a previous episode so it doesn't feel as forced being in the final episode. There should have been a storyline that developed episode after episode that we followed alongside all the others, which would have allowed for way more room for things to happen. It would have been nice to have a change of scenery to Essos in every episode like we had in Thrones. We could have had way more time to develop and make Tylan more interesting. But nah, fucking cram it into this episode. Completely fuck up the pacing and tone. Whatever. All these comically brief glimpses into Rhaenyra's story was so funny. I think I laughed every time it inorganically cut from one scene to just 20 seconds of her running around in the Vale. Are there not guards after her? She's a highborn Targaryen and people aren't worrying why she disappeared. It's like a big part of the lore that the Vale is littered with thousands of barbarian mountain clansmen from dozens of different tribes. Catelyn and Tyrion were out in the Vale for like 10 minutes before they got attacked by barbarians. And she just runs and then spots Sheepstealer and we don't even fucking get to see her claim the dragon. It just cuts away. If she claimed Sheepstealer, it would have at least been a conclusion to her stupid ass fucking storyline. But why should we have any closure in a season finale? This definitely could have been a change made to the script to make the episode feel way more like a finale. Another change they could have made, Fucking show Larys sneaking Aegon out of King's Landing. It happens off screen. That could have been a great scene. Larys and a bunch of his servants trying to sneakily carry this half-burnt cripple out of the Red Keep through the secret tunnels and passages. We could have gotten some insights into Larys' spy network, who haven't done jack shit this entire season. It would have been funny to watch Aegon in that situation. Fuck it, do it off screen. Just like Otto getting captured, presumably by the Beesburys. Do it off screen. Corlys finally accepting that he was wrong, that he's treated his bastard sons like shit, making amends with them. Finally accepting Adam or Alan or whatever the fuck this guy's name was as his son. That could have been a good moment. Maybe have Corlys break down and cry, talking about how he needs him as a son because his whole fucking family is dead. Nah, fuck you, do it off screen. It happens off screen. Aemon burning Sharp Point and killing thousands of innocent people. By far the most drastic and evil thing he's done in the series up to now. The biggest leap for his character and would have made for a huge set piece that would have been perfect for a finale. Nah, do it off screen. Woo, hell yeah. We'll have a whole scene of Tyland rolling around in mud with Philosophy Tube and her perfect teeth, but Corlys accepting Eric as his son, Aegon the King getting smuggled out of King's Landing, Aemon burning Sharp Point and killing thousands of people, Rhaena claiming Sheep Stealer, Otto being captured by the Beesburys, Aemon burning Sharp Point. Do it all off screen. We don't need to see any of that. None of that matters. None of these big character moments for characters we're invested in and have been following the whole fucking show. Fuck them. We got Philosophy Tube now. Just make the whole fucking Dance of Dragons happen off screen too. We'll follow Alicent exclusively in the last 2 seasons as she takes baths and mopes around in Essos while occasionally hearing a report of the civil war happening in Westeros. Writing is hard. Making dialogue for these people to say and make things happen, that's so hard. It's too hard. Just cut every scene off before or after the interesting thing happens. There you go. You guys can do it. Good job, Sarah Hess and Ryan Condal. You guys are so good at what you do. I'm so happy you're the people in charge of this show, and not Miguel Sapochnik anymore, who's helmed some of the biggest episodes of Thrones and was showrunner for season 1. Nah, fuck him. We got Orange is the New Black over here, who said in interviews that she feels, quote, no loyalty to the source material and hasn't even watched Game of Thrones. Yeah, that's the person I trust to write for this show and write this episode. This is representative of a much, much larger overarching issue this season. It has a huge fucking tell, don't show mentality, and it sucks. So much potentially interesting stuff happens off screen in this show. I definitely felt it a bit in season 1 by having Corlys fight the Triarchy for 3 years straight, all off screen. But I chalked that up to just budget problems, and I can forgive that. But here, oh my god, so much of the conflict this season is rooted around events that we never see and only hear about from others. The entire Beesbury Revolution, the whole ass war that the Hightowers are stuck in at Old Town is never shown once. We haven't even seen the Citadel. This is fucking Otto and Alicent's hometown. Just one little scene would have been good enough where maybe we see Daron in action or Otto trying to deal with the war diplomatically. Anything would have been better than just having these people mumble about it once or twice. Can you imagine if Theon in the Ironborn taking Winterfell in season 2 of Thrones happened entirely off screen and we just hear Catelyn and Robb mention it once or twice at their camp? That's like basically what we get here. Like Aemond mentions it like once at the small council, the fact that there's a whole ass war happening around the town where his family grew up. Oh my god. We also really should have gotten a scene showing these Blackwood versus Bracken war crimes, which are a central part of this story. I know we see the aftermath of one battle, which is a good moment, but after Daemon sends out William Blackwood to kill a bunch of women and children, we should have seen that to add greater emphasis to the later conversations, so we can better sympathize with the Blackwoods, so we can be more engaged with these characters and this storyline, and these two sides of this conflict who we only ever see come in and out of Harrenhal. Let's look at season 4 of Game of Thrones. We follow the men of the Night's Watch who are constantly told about how dangerous the wildlings are, how they're vicious savages who will raid and pillage all the villages south of the wall if they're let through. Oh, and look at that. We get a quick little scene where we see the wildlings raid and pillage. So as viewers, we know how dangerous they are, And so the stakes for the Watchers on the Wall battle are elevated because we know that these wildlings can't be let through. Whoop-de-doo! We're constantly told that Corlys is the richest, most ambitious, and one of the most powerful men in Westeros. The dude sailed around the world 9 times, and I never feel that way about his character at all. He's supposed to be the greatest sailor in history, and we've never seen him sail. Compare him to Tywin Lannister, a man whose legacy completely precedes him. He's the richest, most powerful man in Westeros, and you feel that every single time he's on screen. Because you see him be powerful, you see him be a leader, you see him be smart and cunning and ambitious. You get Corlys on a canoe for like 5 seconds, and then you see him do nothing all season. Cool. Of course, that's all what we don't have in this episode. Let's focus on what we do have. The big meat and potatoes of the finale is Alicent and Rhaenyra's second reunion, and what a mess. I can suspend my disbelief. I can buy Rhaenyra sneaking into King's Landing and talking to Alicent at the Sept, even though there's a war about to happen and King's Landing should be completely locked down. King's Landing is so big, I feel like sneaking into the city would be like sneaking into New York City or something. It's whatever. But the fucking hoops that are jumped through here. First off, Alicent goes to the Maester and asks him for help sneaking into Dragonstone. Does the Maester have ships? Have people working for him? How does he pull this off? This is like not what Maesters do at all. And we don't really know how he does it because this happens off screen, by the way. So Alicent's got a ship and means to sneak into Dragonstone because the Maester has them, whatever. But we know there's a blockade set up around King's Landing that stops and checks every ship coming and going from the city. We're reminded of this blockade a dozen times, so we know it exists off screen despite never being shown it, of course. And on top of that blockade, Aemon literally orders for extra security at the docks, every ship coming and going being checked and searched. But this fucking Maester just teleports her over to Dragonstone with no problem, no issue, and that's all just setting up the scene. Here we have Alicent and Rhaenyra, and I've been waiting to talk about this Alicent scene for so long. Alicent proposes that the war can be ended bloodlessly. Aemond is moving to the Riverlands to attack Harrenhal, and when that happens, Alicent will open the doors to the Red Keep, and Rhaenyra can fly in and take the throne. Boom, easy, simple. Alright, it makes sense that above all, Alicent wouldn't want to sacrifice the lives of the hundreds of thousands of people who would eventually die over this petty rivalry. So she'd be willing to hand the throne over to Rhaenyra in order to avoid this conflict entirely. And instead of just accepting that deal and moving on, Rhaenyra tells her that Aegon must die for it to be official, and because she wants a son for a son. Alicent thinks for a little and is just like, okay, yeah, you can behead my son. And then the episode ends. So I'm paraphrasing here. Like, I mean, sure, she's like a little conflicted for like a minute about whether she wants her child to die or not, but this is what happens. And then she walks off and she's like a free woman now. She's not burdened by anything. And then the episode ends. So this doesn't really work. In concept, I think this could be good. Alicent being willing to sacrifice her son for the good of the realm can be a powerful moment, but it's executed so poorly. For one, why doesn't she ever bring up Jaehaerys, her grandson who was killed by Rhaenyra's cause? Rhaenyra wants a son for a son, but didn't she already get that? Did Alicent just forget about Jaehaerys? Her entire grandson who was murdered, she had like a funeral and everything? I also think she makes this decision way too nonchalantly by agreeing to Aegon getting his head cut off in front of the people of King's Landing. In doing that, she is certainly signing Aemon's death warrant as well. He's not going to go quietly, and Rhaenyra is not going to want Aemon to just be flying around free to do whatever he wants. Does she not think Daemon is going to want Otto's head as well? Like, she should know that they fucking hate each other. And when that happens, she doesn't think that Gwaine and Daeron wouldn't probably also be executed too. Rhaenyra just killed like 40 innocent people the previous episode to gain 2 dragon riders. You think she's gonna let all these members of her small council who have been plotting to kill her for months live? Not to mention Kristen Cole for sure is going to die. By making this one move, Alicent has doomed dozens of people around her, many of whom are her own family, and she just doesn't think about it. She just stands on this balcony looking at the sea. Oh wow, look, I'm free. I can run to Essos with my daughter now. I've escaped all the scheming and the evil men. I'm free from the patriarchy. Meanwhile, her entire family is about to get murdered. Not to mention selling out Aegon, your son, who from birth has been groomed to be king against his wishes, at every end being a terrible parent to him, and now you sell him out to be murdered by your political enemy. And I mean it when I say that this could work. This could be a very interesting character insight into Alicent, who's grown so full of hate and spite towards her own family and the world that she'd rather be selfish and let them all get killed while she flees to the Westeros Bahamas. But the show doesn't depict her as such. The music, the way it's shot and written, the come with me fucking stupid shit. It's all, look at Alicent, this tragic individual, forced to make this bad decision for the good of the realm, continuing in line with how the writers view Rhaenyra as this total untouchable saint who can never do any wrong. Oh, Alicent's the same, but on a different side. It's all so tragic. They used to love each other, like 20 years ago, but all these evil men have pushed them apart and forced them to hate each other. And it's this stupid modern feminist 2024 writing that destroys these characters, removing all the interesting characterization and moral ambiguity that should have been a big part of the show, just as it was in Game of Thrones. And just as Season 1 had set these characters up to be. Alicent should fucking hate Rhaenyra. Let's look at these two people's lives. Rhaenyra grew up the privileged eldest daughter of King Viserys, who at every turn escaped or avoided her royal responsibilities because she didn't want them. She turned down every single royal suitor who proposed to her because she didn't want to marry anyone and be forced to bear children, so Viserys didn't force her to. But she wanted to fuck Kristen Cole and coerced him into it, then got into a sham marriage with Leonor while birthing bastards with her side lover. Rhaenyra's kids gouged out Alicent's favorite son's eye and received no consequences for it. Then she faked Leonor's death to marry Daemon because that's who she wanted. Rhaenyra always gets what she wants. Now look at Alicent. Since birth, she's always been a tool for Otto to use for his own political scheming. She never truly received real love and affection from her dad. She was forced to marry her best friend's dad, who was like 30 years older, and then forced to carry children and give birth when she was like 15. Then she shared a bed with a rotting corpse for decades, having to pump out his kids every few years. She was forced to marry her son and her daughter together, and made to use them like political pawns, just like Otto did with her. She's constantly been used and abused by older men. She's sexually humiliated by Larys. Her grandson, her son's firstborn child, was murdered in bed, which traumatized her daughter. Now she's just had to turn on her own family, and she's forced by Rhaenyra to kill her own son. Alicent should fucking unload onto Rhaenyra about how selfish and cruel she is, and Rhaenyra forcing her to give up Aegon should be portrayed as her being a mad Targaryen queen, inflicting this cruelty on a victim like Alicent. But no, none of that. That would be interesting, and this episode was written by Sarah Hess, so all this cruelty and horribleness has to get glazed over since these are women doing it, and they aren't allowed to be cruel and evil towards each other. Then it'll immediately turn back into Hess's little Fire and Blood Rhaenyra x Alicent fanfiction. I'm not a book reader. I should be at this point, but I know the more evil stepmother, Cersei-like Alicent of the books and the mad domineering Queen Rhaenyra would have been so much better to have here. And by fundamentally changing these characters to be as far from their book counterparts as they can be, throwing in all these secret show-only meetings between the two, rewriting the entire story as if it were a love story between these two the entire time, it fucks with the whole story. It fucks with the entire show. Remember Game of Thrones? Remember how that show had some of the most complicated, multi-layered, brilliantly written female characters in all of television? Remember Catelyn? Remember Daenerys? Remember Cersei? Remember Marjorie and Olenna and Arya and Brienne? And fuck, even Sansa. I don't get the Sansa hate personally. Remember how each of these women were complicated people who were just as capable, and in many ways way more so than the men. These are smart, conniving, clever people, but sometimes they make bad decisions. Sometimes they're cruel, sometimes they're evil, but you always understood why that is. Yeah, releasing Jaime Lannister was a bad decision on Catelyn's part, but you understood completely why she did it. Catelyn doesn't just stand around and mope and pout after her husband is murdered by the Lannisters and her daughters are taken hostage. Fuck that. She fucking takes action. She's a strategist. She's out here in Storm's Landing for half a season trying to rally the Baratheons to join with Robb. Taking fucking Tyrion as a hostage because she thinks that Tyrion tried to have her son killed. Cersei blowing up the Sept of Baelor was some top tier villain behavior. But fuck, I understood why she did it. And after her walk of shame, honestly, I was rooting for her to do it. These are complicated, messy people because real life is complicated and messy. This is why Game of Thrones was so great in the first place, because despite it being a fantasy show with dragons and ice zombies, at the heart of all of it is real fucking drama and really smart character writing. But nah, who wrote all that shit? Probably some cis white male from New Jersey. What does he know about women? Hell yeah, Rhaenyra. Hell yeah, Alicent. Fuck yeah, destroy the patriarchy. Hell yeah, Sarah Hess. This is what the Dance of Dragons is really all about. Not the civil war that destroyed the Targaryen dynasty and killed all the dragons. Not a cautionary tale about the folly of the upper class, how insatiable lust for power will only spell one's downfall, how these people are so selfish that their actions unknowingly doomed their entire house and race of people in the years following the war, how politics turn families against each other. It's not about that. It's about these two women in love, but who can't be in love because these evil men have ruined everything for them. Little Jaehaerys' death? Nah, that was Daemon. Rhaenys' death? She volunteered to go. Burning a dozen innocent people? Yeah, they should have known what they were signing up for. And nobody will even bring it up once after it happens, so who cares? Rhaenyra can do no wrong. And that extends to Alicent and Mysaria too. Why are Aegon and Aemon monsters? That has nothing to do with Alicent's parenting. They're just like that because they're evil men, obviously. Oh, Mysaria should probably hate these rich socialite assholes because their egos make them play these games of thrones that cost the lives of thousands of small folk who they ultimately don't care about because they only care about themselves. But nah, she loves Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is so great and strong and independent. She's in love with her. It's really interesting to see how this pseudo oversimplified modern feminist writing from Hess and Condell just ends up feeling more outdated and more out of touch than what George R.R. Martin was doing in the 90s, which thankfully was properly adapted in 2011 for at least, the first 4.5 seasons. This turned into some fucking season 8 level bullshit in its second season. How is that even possible? It feels like there are way too many different voices in the writer's room who all want to do something different with this story, and there's no communication between any of them. Miguel Sapochnik wanted this to be a faithful adaptation of Fire and Blood, while taking some creative liberties when adapting the story for enhanced dramatic effect, like making Rhaenyra and Alicent childhood best friends. Ryan Condal partially wanted to do that, but is far more focused on inserting all the deep lore into the story and connecting things to Game of Thrones. And Sarah Hess doesn't give a fuck about this world and the source material, and instead wants to use this adaptation as a platform to write her own star-crossed lesbian lovers medieval fantasy show. All of these different voices are constantly clashing with one another, and with Sapochnik leaving, the idea of this being a faithful Fire and Blood adaptation is thrown out the fucking window in favor of this bullshit. Alicent's character has been completely fucking decimated. Are we really supposed to believe that the woman who did this would gladly just lay down the life of her son? Like a few weeks earlier before this, she jumped in front of her son trying to protect him from a dragon. And then now she's okay with him getting killed. Do these people even watch their own fucking show? I don't know. To summarize, they screwed the pooch. They dropped the ball. None of these are the same people that were in season 1, and not in they went through so much character development and they changed. No, they're just written to be so fundamentally different. It's as if they didn't even pay attention to what was going on in the writer's room in season 1, and they're just starting over from scratch. Rhaenyra and Alicent have been enemies for way longer than they were friends. Are we supposed to believe that they just had some secret love for each other throughout all of the events of season 1, throughout all the fucking hurt they caused each other? It's bullshit. It's stupid. It's so forced. It's so contrived. This was clearly not the intent and direction that they wanted to take the story in when doing season 1. They're pulling all this out of their ass. None of this is in the books. It's just so stupid. And for my last ramblings on the finale, it is legitimately insulting for it to have ended the way it did. Game of Thrones has set a standard, a precedent that House of the Dragon season 1 also followed, where the second to last episode of a season is always the big payoff, the big conclusion, the big event that's been building up episode after episode, even season after season, and the finale is usually the aftermath of said big event, while opening up new plot threads and ideas that will be continued in the following season. Think Ned's execution in season 1, the Battle of the Blackwater in 2, the Red Wedding in 3, Watchers on the Wall in 4, the Battle of the Bastards in 6, the Burning of King's Landing in 8. This is the formula, the structure every season of Thrones has followed, and they even subvert it, tricking us and playing into our expectations, like season 5, having the Hardhome Massacre happen completely out of the blue in episode 8. It's brilliant, it's exciting and fun. Season 1 of Hot D had Aegon being crowned and the whole Dragon Pit set piece, followed by Aemon murdering Luke in the following episode. Huge stuff. I guess this season, the Red Sowing was supposed to be our huge penultimate set piece. Usually they're supposed to revolve or be the climax to several different plot threads that intersect. Think Blackwater being the culmination of Tyrion becoming the hero of King's Landing, the Hound abandoning the King's Guard, Stannis finally going to war, and Tywin allying the Tyrells and the Lannisters, among other things. The Red Sowing paid off a plot that started 2 episodes ago, Rhaenyra and Jace wanting to use bastards as dragon riders, and maybe starting to become a crazy Targaryen queen, which is completely forgotten about in the finale, and none of this is even mentioned afterward. Season 1 ended with Rhaenyra and the Targaryens squaring up and heading off to war against the High Towers, and Season 2 ended with Rhaenyra and the Targaryens heading off to war against the High Towers, leaving you with the cold, hard realization that the majority of this season was padding and filler, and more than half of it could have been a Star Wars opening text crawl instead. It's not that there are no battles that make it so unsatisfying. I talked about earlier how if the writers really tried, they easily could have rewrote the events of the final episode to be much more satisfying and conclusive while still open-ended. But instead, what we get is nothing satisfying at all. And now we have to wait 2 years to actually see the payoffs we were promised 2 years ago already. And as a whole, this is just such an unsatisfying season of TV, especially after following up the first season. Jace should have been out uniting the northern houses all season. Tyland should have been in Essos uniting the Triarchy all season. Otto should have been dealing with the Beesbury Revolution all season. It should have been so much bigger and grander than it was. And why wasn't it? Why does this feel so much smaller than season 1? Why does this feel so much smaller than even the first season of Game of Thrones, with how much cost cutting they had to do there? Is it the budget? Could they not afford new locations? This season had a $200 million production budget. You got around $20 million per episode, and all we ever see in every episode is Harrenhal, King's Landing, and Dragonstone, with very occasional glimpses of the Vale. Game of Thrones Season 2 had roughly $6 to $8 million per episode, less than half the budget per episode of this season. And we got Dragonstone, Harrenhal, and King's Landing. And we also had The Wall, Castle Black, the Iron Islands, Winterfell, Karth, Storm's End, the Red Waste, Beyond the Wall. Because we had characters we cared about in each of these different locations, the world felt so much bigger and expansive and varied. I think it just comes down to the fact more talented people who had more care and love for the source material worked on that show. You only need to watch one episode of this compared to that and to see it. It's like someone went and sucked all the life out of Game of Thrones, and we're watching the dried out dead husk of something we once loved get paraded around on screen. I read before from someone on Twitter that really the only reason all of us are watching this show is because we loved Game of Thrones so much, and House of the Dragon only really works if you're a prior fan to Thrones. Because without the Thrones connection on its own, this show is really quite mediocre and very bad in many areas. And previously I didn't agree with that take, and now I really do. And that Daemon vision in the finale absolutely confirmed this. I understand the potential hypocrisy of trashing on this season for being too slow, bloated, and uneventful, while complaining that seasons 7 and 8 were way too rushed. But you know, both things can be true. This can be too slow while that can be too rushed. And in my mind, this season is kind of worse in a lot of unique ways that not even the weakest seasons of Game of Thrones have been before. And you know what the craziest thing is? After everything I just said, I still think Season 2 of House of the Dragon is by far one of the better series to come from 2024. The writer strikes and actor strikes really fucked up a lot of productions, and I definitely believe it's the reason why a lot of this season fell apart. While still much of it is definitely the fault of the individual writers, they're not innocent because of the strikes. But when looking at some of the other seasons of shows we've gotten that were definitely affected by the strikes, House of the Dragon got off easy. The Boys Season 4 was so genuinely awful, complete trash from beginning to end. The Bear Season 3 was an empty nothing burger. It was nearly all filler outside of like 1 or 2 worthwhile episodes. Oh my god, The Acolyte? Holy fucking shit. My point is, when compared to what else is on TV at the moment, suddenly House of the Dragon isn't as bad. It's still far better than most of what's on TV. It's just that Game of Thrones is rightfully held to a much higher standard than any other TV show ever. The Boys can put out a disastrous diarrhea shitfest of horrid character writing and filler, and people will shrug and go, let's be real, the show's been going downhill since after season 1. But Game of Thrones has expectations. It has standards to live up to. It has to live up to the most groundbreaking, ambitious, and revolutionary television series of all time. And that's a heavy burden for these writers to bear. And even more so now following Season 8 of Thrones, since now this show is tasked with reviving the entire series and bringing it back to the pop culture light it once stood in. It gives me no joy making this video. I mean, it does. But I don't want to hate Game of Thrones. I don't get off on shitting on something I once loved the way Star Wars fans do. The world of Ice and Fire is my favorite fictional world ever. Game of Thrones, despite the shortcomings in its later half, is still my favorite show. Or second favorite, depending on my mood. And I want more of it. I want more prequels, I want more spin-offs, I want more of this world and these families and these characters. I'm sure, confident in the fact that one day we will get a continuation or a sequel series after The Winds of Winter comes out, and I want that. And I really, really want House of the Dragon to be good. I loved Season 1. I still enjoy a lot of the individual scenes and moments this season, but as a whole, it's such a fucking mess that I can't ignore it. It's not like Season 5 of Thrones, another middling season of a show where, sure, Daenerys' storyline is kinda bad, and that Jaime, Bronn, in Dorne plot is the fucking worst. But the Night's Watch story was excellent. It gave us Hardhome. The High Sparrow was a phenomenal character. Cersei was great that season. The last 3 episodes are fantastic. I can't pick out a bunch of things I like about season 2 the way I can a weaker season of Thrones like season 5. I liked Aegon a lot. Rook's Rest was cool. The red sewing was a cool set piece, even though it didn't amount to anything character-wise. Auric versus Eric was dope. I enjoyed Daemon at Harrenhal in short doses, but I agree that it went on for way too long and was way too repetitive. But these are all just little moments, and as a whole, none of it works. For every one good moment of character writing or a cool set piece I can remember happening, I can think of like 5 gripes. Moments of bad writing, unsatisfying payoffs, boring repetition of the same shit in every episode. I've made peace with the fact that the likes of Thrones' golden age will never be seen again, and it's a total anomaly that we even got those first 4 seasons, let alone how good they were. There will never be another series that matches the production value, the writing, the depth, the spectacle, and popularity of Thrones. And House of the Dragon Season 1 was the closest we got in a long fucking time. But it's just very strange and upsetting that after only 1 season, we're already seeing the exact problems that led to Thrones' downfall being repeated already. Going off book, dumbing down complicated characters, shortened seasons, even with the blueprints having already been written. Like, it's all there already. They just have to, film it. But like I said, in the grand scheme of things, you could do so much worse than this. I look over at what Disney is doing with Star Wars or Marvel, just pumping shit out of the content factory that looks so fucking bad. And I think, God, how lucky are Thrones fans that HBO still somewhat cares, at least a little, about the quality of their content. So what's next? Season 3 of House of the Dragon is set to premiere summer of 2026, and I'd like to be hopeful. We're not in the writer strikes anymore, so the scripts will be given the attention and care that they deserve. The public outcry for this season has been the biggest since season 8, and these writers have to be seeing what's going on and will hopefully change for the better. If season 3 comes out and is a banger, I will be the first person on the front lines cheering that we're so back and Game of Thrones is still alive. And when the whole show is out, if they stick the landing, we'll only have to look back on season 2 as that one bad season caused, unfortunately, by the strikes going on at the time. But I'm not that optimistic. I keep thinking, what if this is it? What if this is the level of writing we're stuck with for this show? Condal confirmed that season 3 will also consist of 8 episodes, which means season 4 will probably also be 8 episodes, and I cannot possibly wrap my head around how they are going to tell the rest of this story in only 16 episodes. I can't imagine it, so there will undoubtedly be some corners cut and probably some rushed pacing in the seasons to follow. And what'll that look like? I have no idea. But looking at the finale of this season, like, Christ, it can't be worse. There's no way it can be worse, right? There's so much heavy lifting that season 3 will have to do, and I don't know if these writers, especially with that shorter episode count, will be able to pull it off. There has to be a lot of fundamental changes to this story. Season 2 made so many of these characters super uninteresting. Rhaenyra, Alicent, and Corlys were ruined. I don't care about Jace, Helena, Baela, Mysaria, and Rhaena at all. I'm so much less invested in these characters and this story now going into season 3 than I was at the end of season 1, which is really bad for your show. I guess hope for the best, but expect the worst. We won't know until 2026, if the world is even still around then. Next year, at least, we're getting A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, a spin-off based on the Dunk and Egg novellas. I'm very excited for this series. I think a much smaller scale, more lighthearted 6-episode story is exactly what Game of Thrones desperately needs. It would be really funny and awesome if it comes out and is 100 times better than season 2 of Hot D. Oh, that would be so great. But we've seen so little of this show so far that I can't say just yet how good I think it'll actually be. There's also supposed to be like 7 or 9 new spin-offs like in the works, like a bunch of animated ones as well as live action. There's going to be an Aegon's Conquest show. I mean, I hope that one's good, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure how they'll go about adapting that, because like Aegon comes down and burns a bunch of people and conquers Westeros. There isn't like crazy amount to that story, but only time will tell. We'll see. They're doing like a Corlys animated spin-off too, which is like so funny because they made him like the worst character ever during this season. Yeah, I can't say I'm hyped for that one. And I also don't think we're ever going to be getting the Winds of Winter. Like straight up, I don't think that book will ever be finished, let alone A Dream of Spring. Like, gee, there's still supposed to be another one after Winds of Winter. Fuck. So the future of Thrones, you know, I don't know. Is it still in a bright place? Is it completely gone? Is there no chance of this franchise ever being good again? I really don't know. I can't say. But, you know, in the meantime, while we wait for all this upcoming Game of Thrones content, I might as well just read the book. Thanks for watching.